Uh, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this first session of the final day of this 8th World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet. My name is Tenzing Jigme, and I am a Tibetan member of parliament elected by and representing the Tibetan diaspora in North and South America. I live in the great state of Minnesota, which is located in the Midwest region here in the United States. Like most nations, states, cities, we in Minnesota too have faced the consequences of climate change. Last year, we had an unprecedented drought season, which caused some of our lakes, rivers, and waterfalls to dry up. About 3 weeks ago, we had 13 tornadoes in one day. 13 tornadoes in one day. What was going on? Were the hockey gods mad that our team, the Minnesota Wild, exited the Stanley Cup playoffs in the first round? What was going on? I don't know. Anyways, climate change today impacts all of us no matter where we live, no matter how big or small our economy is. Today we are here to talk about Tibet and the significance of Asia and Tibet in global warming and climate change. The Tibetan Plateau is widely known as the third pole because of its ice fields that contains the largest reserve of fresh water outside the polar regions. And so it is the largest source of fresh water and ice in the world aside from the poles. Tibet is also known as the water tower of Asia, as it is the source of 6 of the largest rivers in Asia, including the Ganges, the Indus, the Brahmaputra, the Salween, the Mekong, and the Irrawaddy. It is also a source of the major river systems that provide irrigation, power, and drinking water to over 1.9 billion people living downstream. As China implements efforts to transform the Tibetan Plateau, these water sources are clearly threatened by their policies and actions. Tibet is also home to the largest number of glaciers, ice caps, and permafrost in the Himalayan region. Dr. Martin Mills, director of Scottish Centre for Himalayan Research in Scotland, recently said, "The global climate warming is causing a catastrophic collapse of the Tibetan pole cryosphere. The general temperature of the Tibetan Plateau has seen consistent movement towards a warmer and wetter climate and a reduction in the number of very cold winter days since the 1980s. There is clear evidence that temperatures across the third pole region are increasing at a rate of 2 to 4 times of the global average, a process that has been underway for more than half a century. China's policies to transform the Tibetan Plateau economically and demographically have slowly caused the destruction of Tibetans' fragile environment and the livelihood of Tibetan nomads. As the world comes together to mitigate climate change, it cannot ignore Tibet. The reality is what happens to the ecosystem and the environment of Tibet should be a matter of concern to not only Tibetans, but also the rest of the world. So to discuss and shed light on how climate change is affecting the Tibetan Plateau and why that matters today, let me introduce you to 2 of our distinguished speakers on our panel this morning. Our first speaker will be His Honorable Hung San Han, who is a Taiwanese legislator and member of the Social Welfare and Environmental Hygiene Committee in Taiwan. And following him will be Ms. Dechen Palmo, who is a research fellow at the Environment and Development Desk of the Tibetan Policy Institute in Dharamsala, India. So we will first have Hang speak, and then followed by Dechen, after which we will leave it up to a Q&A session with our audience here today. So Hang is the 10th legislator of Taiwan nominated by the Democratic Progress Party, DPP. He has been a member of the Social Welfare and Environmental Hygiene Committee since the first session of the current term. Prior to joining the Legislative Yuan, Hung was the Deputy Secretary General of the Green Citizens Action Alliance. He worked with civil society and experts to advocate the country's energy transition, environmental governance, and climate change policy. Mr. Hung San.
Good morning, everyone. I'm honored and grateful to participate in the WPCT at Washington, D.C. to share my thoughts about the global climate emergency. I'm a legislator representing DPP, the ruling party in Taiwan. Before I started my political career in 2020, I have been an active member in Taiwan's NGO community to work on environment and energy issue for more than 10 years. Therefore, climate policy is my primary work in the Congress. Global warming and climate change is now one of the world's top concerns, like Antarctic ice sheet, glaciers on Tibetan Plateau also have serious impact on the warming. The study on Tibetan glaciers are important indicators for global climate change. Research shows that the temperature of the Tibetan Plateau has increased 1.3 degrees Celsius over the past 50 years, 2 to 4 times higher than the global average. 82% of the ice has retreated, with more than 60% of the glaciers in danger of melting by 2050. The change of climate and the hydrological regime of the Tibetan Plateau is extremely important to Central and East Asia. As we all know, the third poles thousands of glaciers and the regular snow smell form the headwater for 10 of Asia's biggest river, which bring drink water directly to 200 million people, while these river basins indirectly support more than 1.3 million people. Therefore, both to the world and Asia, advanced climate change adaptation for the Tibetan Plateau is crucial. There is no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to adaptation. Adaptation needs to be a cross-sectoral, multiple-level, and inter-regional activity. Adaptation is about new way of thinking and deal with risk and hazards. Every suitable adaptation plan requires local experience and resources, especially a process of learning by people and the local community. Without proper channel to support engagement of stakeholders, it's hard to increase resilience. From our experience of adaptation strategy in Taiwan, the citizen participation and the bottom-up approach is significant to form an effective policy. This is also possible in democratic system, but not in a totalitarian state like China. Therefore, we support the voice of the Tibetan community should be included and highlighted in the international climate talks, not only because we value human rights, but also for the interest of the whole region. Due to the separation from the Chinese government, it is regrettable that Taiwan cannot participate in any formal conference under the UN. But we still have lots of important information to share with the international community. Since our President Tsai Ing-wen took office in 2016, we have started our energy transition to rapidly increase the use of renewable energy, reduce coal-fired and phase out nuclear power by 2025. Within this, President Tsai has announced that Taiwan, like many countries in the world, share the common goal of net zero emission by 2050. This year, our government published Taiwan's pathway to net zero emission in 2050, including enhanced investment in hydrogen energy, energy storage, energy efficiency, and the EV. Just transition is also emphasized. We are trying to figure out the pathway to ensure that no one is left behind in the process of transition. Also, Climate Change Response Act has been sent to the legislature and it is expected to pass in the next session. As we all know, the impact of climate change are global in scope. No single organization or country on their own can limit global temperature well. We sincerely hope to enhance partnership with Tibetan community and the global society and work together through the tough challenge. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Hong. Um, Next, we'll have Ms. Dechen Palmo. She is a research fellow at the Environment and Development Desk of the Tibetan Policy Institute in Dharamshala, India. She researches Tibet's transboundary rivers, focusing mainly on the Mekong and Brahmaputra rivers. She pursued her master's in international studies from Stella Maris College, University of Madras, and MPhil in International Relations from the University of Madras. She has also submitted her PhD thesis titled China's National Interests on Transboundary Water Resources, a comparative study of the Brahmaputra and the Mekong River. She has also written extensively on environmental issues in Tibet caused by the developmental projects of the Chinese government, and her work has been widely published in national and international media. Her presentation today is titled Major Environmental Challenges Facing Tibet.
Hello, is it audible? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So, I would like to start by thanking the organizers for giving me this opportunity to come and speak on Tibet's environment. And I would also like to thank the chair for your gracious introduction. So, today, the topic of my presentation is major environmental challenges facing Tibet. Next. Next. Yeah. So this is the layout of my presentation. So before we move on with my presentation, I want to draw your attention to the this 9th century stone pillar. Next. Okay. This 9th century stone pillar, which is standing outside the Chokang Temple in Lhasa today. It is very interesting to note that how Tibetan views their land as early as 9th century. In this inscription of the stone Sino-Tibetan Peace Treaty of 822, we can find a line that describes Tibet, quote, Kangri Tumbo ni yu, Chu Chimbo ni go, Yul to sa zang, which is roughly translated as Tibet, it is the center of high snow mountains, the source of mighty rivers, and a high country, a pure land. So, regarding this outline of my presentation, first I want to talk about the why Tibet environment matters. And then secondly, I will speak about the climate change impact on Tibetan Plateau. And then third, finally, I would like to speak about the current environmental situation inside Tibet. Thanks. So talking about the why Tibet's environmental matters, I've already mentioned that they knew that Tibet Plateau, it's very important, not only for the Tibet, it is like have global significance. And Tibet, there are different names given to Tibet. Tibet, such as the roof of the world, Tibet as the third pole, Tibet as the water tower of Asia. So this name, it already signifies how important Tibetan Plateau is. Next. So talking about the Tibet, the roof of the world, a glance at this photo shows how Tibetan Plateau dominates the geography of the Asia. Situated at the heart of Asia with average elevation of 4,500 meters above sea level, the Tibet covers an area of 2.5 million square kilometers, which is around 2% of the Earth's land surface. And most of the world's highest peaks above the 7,000 meter are all found in Tibet. And also the world's highest mountain, Mount Everest, it's also in Tibet. Next. And Tibet is also known as the third pole. And Tibet is located at its very strategic importance, because of a large repository of fresh water resources outside the North Pole and South Pole. Therefore, Tibetan calls it the land of snow, Kangjong. So, Tibetan Plateau has around 46,000 glaciers, which is around 14.5% of the world's total, covering an area of 105,000 square kilometers. This name was first third pole. This name was first given by a Swiss explorer named Marcel Kurz in 1933. Nowadays, the geographer or the scientists and researchers all around the world use this name, the third pole. Next. So talking about the water tower of Asia, all the major rivers of Asia have its source in Tibet. You can clearly see in this picture that major river flowing from Tibet there are around 10 major rivers flowing from Tibet into 10 most densely populated nations in the world. There were around 1.5 billion people who are directly dependent on these rivers flowing from Tibet. And if there is any damage on these rivers, it will have huge impact on all the downstream countries. Next. So these are the 10 major rivers which flows from Tibet. And in Tibetan, we call Machu, Jichu, Zachu, Gamonguchu, Yalung Tsangbo, Macha Kapab, Langchen Kapab, Senge Kapab, Bunchu, and Lota Shashu. These are the rivers. It flows into most of the Southeast Asian countries and South Asian countries, right from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and all the Southeast Asia, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia. All these countries are very much dependent on the rivers coming from Tibet. Next. However, the Tibet is changing, mainly due to the anthropogenic climate change. This graph shows that the gradual increase of temperature on the Tibetan Plateau over the last 100 years. You can clearly see that there is a line, that zero line. It is a tipping point where the ice turns into water. So we can clearly see that most of the glaciers on Tibetan plateaus are melting in recent years. So with this melting of the glaciers, and we can see that there are major rivers like Yangtze Yellow are showing reduce in the water level because of the diminished meltwater, and trans-mountain rivers like Indus, which are around 40% of this river is glacier fed. So however, these rivers, major international rivers, are diminishing in their water flow. Next. So this glacier melting glaciers on the Tibetan is melting at an alarming rate as the global temperature rise. In 2007, a study by the Tibet Autonomous Region, so-called Tibet Autonomous Region Meteorological Bureau, found that Tibet is heating at 0.3 degrees Celsius each decade, more than twice the world's average. So, according to another research which was published by ICMOD, it is an intergovernmental institute based in Nepal, and in their Hindu Kush Himalayan assessment report, it has been estimated that by 2100, at least one-third of the Hindu Kush Himalayan glacier will be depleted, even if global warming is held at 1.5 degrees Celsius. So during the COP21 summit, COP21 Paris Agreement, which was set out a global framework to avoid a dangerous climate change by limiting global warming well below the 2 degrees Celsius and pursuing efforts to limit by 1.5 degrees Celsius. So according to this ICMOD report, even if we have limit this global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius, one-third of the glaciers would be gone in Tibet. So another glaciologist, Yao Tantong, he's from Chinese Academy of Sciences. He says that if melting continues at this rate, two-thirds of glacier would be gone by 2050. So this is the situation what Tibet Plateau is facing. Next. And glacier melting is a very important indicator and a result of climate change. One known example is at the Kawakarpo in Yunnan. So it is considered one of the most sacred regions in Tibetan Buddhism. So the villagers here have lined that retreat of glaciers and to the increasing pollution, expanding tourisms, and all those, climbing, attempt to climb the sacred mountains. These have led to the melting of the glaciers. Mignon Glacier is one of the fastest shrinking glaciers in the world. Next. So besides melting of the glaciers, there's extensive permafrost degradation on the Tibetan Plateau. And geographically, Tibetan Plateau is a vast expanse of permafrost, approximately two-thirds of the Tibet. If permafrost is this frozen layer of soil. So permafrost is very sensitive to climate change. It's very particularly vulnerable to warming temperature. For centuries, these permafrost soils have acted like a sponge, observing and managing the flow of these mighty rivers flowing from Tibet. They have also been the storehouse for millions of tons of carbons. However, this permafrost on the Tibetan Plateau is melting at very fast rate. So around 81 permafrost of the Tibetan Plateau may disappear by 2100 due to the warming climate. And around 10% of permafrost has already been degraded in the past decades. So with the degradation of the permafrost, there are widespread of desertification in Tibetan Plateau, and which Chinese government has traditionally blamed this on the Tibetan nomads. Next. And with the degradation of the thawing of the permafrost and the receding glaciers, we can clearly see that most of the lakes in Tibet is growing and it is expanding and overflowing. So this is one example of Serling Tso. The first photo was taken in 2003 and another one is 2004. You can clearly see that this lake Serling, which is the earlier used to be the second largest lake in the world in Tibet. Now it has surpassed the Lake Namso, which was the first. Now this Lake Serling so is the first largest lakes in Tibet. And these lakes, in within 1 year, this lake has overflowed and it overflow into another lakes nearby, inundating many of the grasslands in nearby, and it has huge impact on the local Tibetan communities living around the lakes. Next. Talking about the current environmental situation inside Tibet, there are number of dams being built on those major rivers flowing from Tibet, and since Tibet is very rich in mineral resources, there are continuous mining, and then Tibetan nomads were being resettled in the name of climate adaptation. So next, I will want to talk about the damming of Tibetan rivers. There's an intensification of hydropower dam construction in all the major rivers on Tibet. And in 12 5-year plan, 13 5-year plan, 14 5-year plan, in this all past 3 5-year plans have focused vastly on damming and water diversion projects. So there are multiple dams being built in the areas of high seismic activity areas by state-owned hydropower companies. The dams can be both trigger for or end up being destroyed by the earthquake. And there are, as you can see in the map, there are cascades of dams which was built on the Tibetan rivers flowing from Tibet. And it can cause a huge chain reaction if there is a kind of, damage, kind of earthquake happening in this region. So China, as of now, China has the world's largest number of dams. Around half of the world dams can be found in China. And there are since the Chinese government had already built most of the dam on their part of rivers, now they are eyeing on the Tibetan side. So there are in this recent 14 5-year plan, Chinese government had uh, put Chinese government had came up with the plan to build a dam on the Great Band just before river enters into India. If once this dam has been built, it would be the world's largest dam, and it will have huge impact on the biodiversity or in the downstream countries who are dependent on these rivers, like India and Bangladesh. Next. So next, I want to talk about the mining. Tibet is called Xizang, Western treasure by China, and has become one of the important sources of minerals needed for China's economic growth. There were around 120 mineral resources can be found in the Tibet. Large-scale mining of copper, gold, silver, chromium, and mineral and the other rare earth minerals. So these mining have a huge impact and leading to record levels of water pollution in Tibet. Tibetans who express even a moderate concern about the impact of toxic waste, deforestation, and large-scale erosion risk being imprisoned or tortured or killed. Mining has traditionally been a flashpoint of protests, and there were around 30 major mine-related protests since 2009 without the people's consent or involvement. There are continuous mining in the Tibetan region, destroying the mountains, sacred mountains, and polluting the rivers. And however, due to the recent Chinese government ecological, civilization, all these different terms has been used by the Chinese leaders, and there are shutdown of some small mines, where are the largest one still continues. So to make way for the minings and for the land grabbing, there are removal of Tibetan nomads. Tibetan rangeland covers approximately 70% of these total areas, and as of now, like there are more than 2 million Tibetan nomads has been removed from the Tibetan plateau. And grasslands are degradation are due to the rising temperature and pale pulses, not because of the overgrazing of the Tibetan herders. And these Tibetan nomads have history of more than 8,000 years, and Tibetans nomads, they have a deep understanding of grassland and adaptation skill. However, they were blamed by the Chinese government of rangeland degradation, and it is increasing evidence that it is the climate and precipitation that drives vegetation rather than overgrazing. This is a resettlement village in the Machin County of Eastern Tibet. So nomadic pastoralists across Tibet are being displaced from the grassland and resettled in often bleak concrete encampment in remote areas far from community amenities and area nearby the road and urban areas as part of China's ambition to elaborate the plans to reshape the Tibetan plateau. Moreover, herders who have experienced resettle have further economic, cultural, social, and political marginalization. So in other words, climate change adaptation can be another form of expropriation rather than something that actually improves the lives and ecosystem. And this is some of the protected areas, so-called protected areas designated by the Chinese government. So the state have justified the relocation of tens of thousands of herders from the Shenzhen areas in the name of climate change adaptation. Yet there are many researchers who shows that there are no reason to believe that a complete removal of grazers is actually adaptive in context of climate change. Climate adaptation is crucial, but we need to be careful that these policies are actually adaptive. Of course, these policies also have severe social effects. Many settlements are poorly built without adequate water, sanitation, infrastructure, standard of living have declined due to the subsidies not keeping pace with the inflation. Herders have very complex set of skills, but the herders, they generally don't have the ability to enter in the job market in many resettled Tibetan lives, or lives or the government subsidies and sales of caterpillar fungus. So more importantly, of course, resettlement undermines the traditional ties to territory and thus works together with the certain assimilation trends to erode the linguistic, cultural continuity, and now there is ecological resettlement policies happening in Tibet. The situation of Tibetan nomads in Senchen does not represent an isolated case. Such forced relocation in the name of environmental protection is throughout the Tibet. Rich Tibetan culture and art can be traced back to thousands of years. The preservation of indigenous Tibetan culture is equally important to the preservation of flora and fauna of national park. Therefore, it is important for Chinese government to make sustainable policies for the protection of environment along with the protection of Tibetan culture and religion. Next. And here are the few recommendations for the Chinese government. For successful adaptation and mitigation to be possible, Chinese policymakers should consider the importance of local ecological and traditional knowledge and community-based resource management institute. And to understand the potential future threat of the global climate change, it is crucial to understand the Tibetan Plateau, which is on the front line of climate change. Third, the Chinese government should allow pastoralists and nomads to live in the protected areas, including the newly created national park on the Tibetan Plateau, and continue to practice the practice of pastoralism. Given its importance, the impact of anthropogenic climate change on Tibetan plains is not only a regional but a global issue of unique significance for the futures of life on Earth. According to V. Ramanathan, an atmospheric scientist, he says that our understanding of global climate change would be incomplete without taking into consideration what is happening on the Tibetan Plateau. Thank you.
Thank you, Dejan, for that really intriguing presentation. I'm sure this information might be old to some folks here and might be new to a lot of other folks here. So thank you for that presentation. So we will start the Q&A discussion now. And but let me just kick it off by asking you a question first, Dejan. As you said in your presentation, 1/3 of the Hindu Kush mountains depleted, and talked about the glacier permafrost, melting of the glaciers and the permafrost. So if you could just kind of explain to us what happens when you say glaciers are melting and permafrost is melting. What happens when that takes place, and who is affected by that and why?
Yeah. Of course, with the melting of the glaciers, there are like for temporarily there are increase in the water flow, but in long run there would be a decrease which will cause a huge water scarcity throughout the region. So as I've mentioned earlier, that 1/3 of the world's population are dependent on rivers flowing from Tibet. If there is a reduce in the water level, it will have impact on the people who are dependent on these rivers for hydrology, for fishing, for agriculture. So countries like India and China, they are two world's most populous countries in the world. However, these are the two countries, they are facing a huge water scarcity issues. So you can see that there are strategies like Brahmachalani. He says that in Third World War, it might happen on the water, since in this whole world, even though like 70% of the whole world is covered by water, but only 3% of water is for our use. And however, from this 3%, only 1%, and to remaining 2% is in the either in the ice form, so we can't use it. There are only 1% of water which is accessible for the human use. And however, this water and has been, due to climate change, has huge impact, and due to the other, anthropogenic issues, most of the waters are depleted or been, polluted. So in future there might be huge challenges for this huge water scarcity issues. So water flowing from Tibet, it is a perennial. It flows throughout the years, right? So in India, like India and other Southeast Asian countries, they are very much dependent on these rivers. So they have only seasonal monsoon seasonal where they get these rivers, and rest of the years they are dependent on these rivers flowing from Tibet. So Tibet's water are very important. It plays very strategic roles in terms of environment. Thank you.
We'll open it up to the floor. Please raise your hand, and we have a microphone going around. So please stand up, introduce yourself, and then you can ask your question. So we'll start back there. Mr. Dinino.
Thank you. My name is Con Donino, former senator of Canada. Have been involved for a number of years with this issue, the issue of Tibet. This truly is an incredibly important international issue. It's a worldwide problem that needs to be addressed in a way that I probably assume, and from what I know, has not been. What is the United Nations and indeed the international community doing about this? Is there any action being taken at those levels to address this issue?
Want to translate that for? Well,
I need help with the translation. Yeah, so I speak in Chinese and yeah. 在刚刚看到的西藏高原的例子里面，其实我们发现一个更严重的问题是，其实西藏高原是一个非常在气候敏感的地带，但是在国际的气候的谈判里面却发不出声音。
So from the example we saw from the Tibetan plateau, there's a serious problem that we can see the Tibetan plateau is very sensitive to climate change, but in the international coordinations and conference, their voice hasn't been heard by the international communities.
我举个例子。比方说，我们知道有很多的小岛国家，其实也是非常气候敏感的地区。可是这些小岛的国家在气候谈判里面组成了一个蛮强的联盟，去表达他们自己的期望跟利益。这是一个很经典的例子。但我们看到西藏高原或者是藏族在这些气候谈判里面，他们的声音却被中国代表，而中国并不会把这样子的危机清楚的表达给国际社会。
So another good example is that you can see that some island countries in Pacific, they are also very vulnerable to climate change, and they could form alliance and become a very strong voice in the international communities. However, for the Tibetan communities, China will not show the problems what happened in Tibetan plateau. So this is another good example that's showing that the voice of Tibetan's community should be heard in the international arena.
西藏的社群跟台湾一样，我们其实都没有办法进到这个联合国的这个里面去表达我们清楚的声音跟需求。所以我自己很希望是在气候议题这个 global 的 agenda 里面，我们应该要开辟 UN 以外其他的管道，然后想办法可以让像这样子被忽略的声音，但却又这么敏感的声音，可以进到这个谈判里面，告诉大家严重性跟我们需要什么，那需要国际社会帮助什么。
So like Tibet, Taiwan also faces like the similar problem that we could not join we cannot participate in any UN affiliated organizations to make our arguments and the needs being heard by the international communities. So I would like to work with, we could work together to create another access to make sure that our arguments and need and problems being heard by the international communities.
中国政府一直想要代表西藏或代表台湾，在气候的议题上面来垄断这个代表权。这件事情，我们应该要非常非常有意识的去突破它，甚至去打破它。因为中国参与在气候议题里面，有他自己在全球霸权上面的利益。那他的参与也并不稳定。常常只是为了要跟美国、要跟西方社会去做对抗，所以我们应该找到我们自己把声音发出来的路径。那这非常非常需要今天20几个国家的代表，我们一起共同把这个管道给创造出来。
So the Chinese government always trying very hard to represent Taiwan and Tibet's voice, especially in the climate change problems. However, we need to be conscious about this situation and trying to making a breakthrough. We need to create a roadmap to make sure that our voice being heard. So that's why this convention is so important, because we have more than 25 parliamentarians coming together, so we can work together to create another access to make sure the voice being heard.
Thank you.
Would you like to add to that?
A little bit. Since what Mr. Hong had said about the representation at the Environment Conference, UN Environment Conference, sadly, Tibetan, likewise Taiwanese government, we can't officially participate in such a conference. However, we attend a COP conference every year to raise the importance of the Tibetan plateaus, and we call upon the international community to support and raise Tibetan environment significance at the global platforms. So we request, or we urge the countries around the world to recognize the global ecological importance of the Tibetan Plateau, and then strengthen the climate change research on Tibetan Plateau. Even though there are many scientific research coming out from Tibet, but most of the research are mainly done by the Chinese scientists. So we need an independent scientific research on the Tibetan Plateau to have a clear picture of what is really happening on the Tibetan Plateau. And other than this, we also urge the Chinese government to respect the traditional knowledge of the Tibetan and way of life. And there are increasing urbanization and tourism in Tibet, and we urge the Chinese government to strictly regulate such policies. So, last but not least, but we ask for the global climate action for Tibet, which is the world's third pole. And yeah, that's it. I want to thank you.
We have Putila Karpache from.
Thank you both for your presentations. My question actually is quite similar to the one that has already been asked, and I wanted to ask Mr. Hang San-han, given that Taiwan is not been able to be represented in UN-affiliated organizations or conferences like the IPCC, what international venues or arenas has Taiwan been successful in raising the issue of the climate crisis? And has there been areas where you have seen more success than others? A little bit about, how you've been able to get there, because I'm thinking that, perhaps there might be some lessons we can learn as well to bring Tibet into the international stage. Thank you.
OK，事实上我并不觉得 台湾的经验已经足够称为成功了。
To be honest, I don't think that the experiences Taiwan you can say it is a success.
确实，就像刚刚说的，因为 climate change 是一个全球性的议程，可是我们在这种全球性的议程里面被中国高度的打压，所以这也导致台湾其实在因应气候议题上面，我们是比西方或者是一些敏感国家来得慢的，这是事实。
Like the previous presentation, the climate change is a global issue. Due to China's pressure on Taiwan, on international organizations, which also leading Taiwan acting rather slowly than other Western countries and sensitive areas.
但我们确实在过去几年，因为大力的推动能源转型，所以正在卖力的追赶中。
But however, Taiwan in the past few years, we are making a great efforts to push the energy transitions. So we do have some results.
当然，台湾接下来会大力的推动能源转型，有一个很重要的原因，是因为供应链会被这个国际的品牌去要求减碳，跟要更高的使用再生能源。
So the reasons why Taiwan trying to choose the path to energy transition is because that the international supply chain will require less carbon footprint, and also trying to require more parts being properly produced in this kind of climate change issues.
但在国际参与的层面上面，我们正努力的打开一些新的机会跟空间。比方说，在去年的这个 COP26 我们确实没办法参与正式的会议，但我们在 Glasgow 开始办像 Taiwan Days 像这个方式，跟我们的国际友人产生更多的合作跟对话。
But we do see some opportunities in international participation in climate change. Like last year, the COP26, which is held in Glasgow, we held a Taiwan Day to make sure that to demonstrate Taiwan's results and making sure our voice being heard.
但我想要强调一点是，我认为其实因应气候变迁，民主是一个非常非常重要的元素。
But the thing I want to emphasize that how to respond to climate change, democracy plays a critical role.
就举刚刚 adaptation 就调试这个例子来说，其实由上而下的调试是很难成功的。你必定要把社区的声音、在地的声音、在地人民的需求给这个一起发出来，然后去提出计划。真正属于这个真正的调试，才有可能会产生效果。
So take the previous presentation about adaptation. The way if you want to address this issue from the top down procedures, that you may ignore the local community's needs. So you need to consider the local people's need, and you can come up with a plan. So the real adaptation could be success.
如果中国政府关于西藏高原的调试的计划没有西藏人的需求跟声音跟在地的智慧的话，我认为这个调试的计划是很难成功的。这是民主跟这个气候变迁调试，我觉得是非常强烈的关联跟互相支持。
So any plan trying to address the climate issues on Tibetan Plateau without local Tibetans' voice and support, it will be very difficult and effective for any plan. So that's why democracy is very important in this kind of climate adaptation.
Yeah, thank you.
Tenzin Chikdale.
Thank you. My name is Chikdale, and I'm a member of the Tibetan Parliament in exile. So I thought I'd just put this out as a food for thought for all of us here and the viewers online. As Honorable Si Kyung pointed out at the opening session, the essence of semantics in securing Tibet's statehood and nationhood, I too believe that any form of conversation on Tibet should eventually converge on Tibet as a nation, because ours is a fight as a nation and a people. And therefore, we should challenge any form of engagements knowingly or refrain from any form of engagements unknowingly using semantics that takes away the agency of presenting Tibet as a nation. Now, if I assume it right, Tibetan Plateau is a convenient term for China to use likewise. So I just wanted to hear what's your take on this, Dechenla, and if Honorable Member of the Taiwan Parliament, Hang Sun, would like to add as well. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Jigdala, thank you so much for your question. Yeah, I really agree with what you have said. And earlier, we have been using this term, the Tibetan Plateau, and this is not only I don't see this in political perspectives. This is what I'm trying to look this environmental issue through the through environmental perspectives, like why Tibetan, instead of Tibet, why I'm using this Tibetan Plateau, even though I have tried to, try to reduce the use of the word Tibetan Plateau. However, the Tibetan Plateau doesn't only covers the whole of Tibet. It also have this whole of Himalayan region, including in this, India and other region nearby. So yes, that's the reason why I've been using this term, the Tibetan Plateau. Other than what you have said is correct, and whenever I can, I've been using the term Tibet, if there is, if the issue is related with the Tibet, and I use the terms Tibetan Plateau when the issue covers the whole of the regions.
在我自己的认识里面，气候议题有几个重要的层次。一个层次是在全球议程上面的层次，一个层次是在国家的资源动员上的层次，一个层次是在于关于 local 的这个社区上面能够展现智慧来调试的层次。
So talking about the climate change, I think there are multiple layers to address these issues. One is from the global point of view, the other is from nation point of view, the other is from the local people.
我确实认为在西藏高原的气候变迁议题会比台湾更辛苦的地方，因为一个中国政府，它把西藏高原的资源当作这种消耗，或者是就是用各种方式去消费，但不管它的永续。
So I have to admit that the situation in Tibetan Plateau will be more difficult than what happened in Taiwan right now. It is because that China, they will use the natural resources in Tibetan Plateau without the long-term plan and the restorations.
所以刚刚在这三个层次里面，在全球层次上面会被中国政府打压，但在国家的层次上面，一样就被当作是被中国政府掠夺的对象。这是我认为在西藏高原很多的行动会比其他的国家来得更加辛苦的原因。
So from the global level, of course, the voice from Tibetan Plateau will be silenced by China, and from the nation's level, of course, Chinese government will use any way to extract the resources from Tibetan Plateau.
所以就我自己的观点来说，我觉得就像刚刚讲的，是不是要把这个西藏视为一个 nation， 从一个 nation 的观点来重新去形塑在因应气候变迁上面关于西藏属于自己的计划。我认为这个事情是关键中的关键，而我们其他的国家也有义务要协助西藏的社群用一个 nation 的角度去表达 西藏关于要怎么保护他们西藏高原这样子的计划跟期待。
So from my personal point of view, it matters a lot to see how we address these problems and the climate issues in Tibet Plateau. Because if we could help, all the nations could help Tibet to think about the problem, what happens in Tibet Plateau as a nation, as a point of view of a nation, then that will make a big difference.
我觉得这不是只是当做一个议题，not just a issue， 而是要把整个西藏高原跟西藏的社群当作是一个主体来思考，这个主体需要用什么样子的方法，在时间跟空间之内保护西藏高原，来保护全球的环境。
So it's just not an issue. We need to think the Tibet Plateau and the people living in Tibet as a whole society, so we can finally address these global issues together. Thank you.
Gentleman right there, please. Yeah.
I just want to raise few questions. Number one, the whole concept of the river drying up and affecting the downstream countries. I think the education aspect of this, the problem that is actually happening to the downstream and the melting of river glaciers is already well known as far as I can see. My main issue here is the downstream countries, the people who are raising the issue are only Tibetans, as far as we are concerned at this moment. But we are talking about the effect on the downstream countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Laos, and all these, Vietnam and all these. Now, for the net zero achievement, there is a funding for getting that. And why the environmentalists can't bring the downstream countries together to get the funding so that there is a actual effect on the melting. Because in terms of education, dissemination of the information, I think there is no doubt that the glaciers are melting. And the degree in which the net zero at 1.5 is not going to have any effect on the Tibetan glaciers. So our thinking and our education should be slightly different from just concentrating on glacier melting. What do you say to that?
You want to take this? Yeah.
Thank you. Whenever we attend the COP conference, we do visit Southeast Asian countries or the South Asian countries who are dependent on Tibet's rivers. So during COP26 conference, we got a chance to visit one of the downstream countries, the Bangladesh. And when we met the delegates there, we spoke about the Brahmaputra River, the Jamuna, which is called Jamuna in Tibet, in Bangladesh. When we told them that there are huge dams coming up on the Yalung Tsangpo, and which will have huge significance, a huge impact on the downstream once these dams are built. There are already 3 dams have been built on the Yalung Tsangpo, upper reaches of the rivers. So once the dams on the lower reaches of Yalung Tsangpo built, it will block almost more than half of the waters coming from Tibet. So when we told them that, they said, one of the delegation, they said, yes, of course we know about these issues. We know that there are dams being built, but it is very difficult to approach Chinese government because this area itself is very sensitive, it seems. So Tibet is very, like issue they don't want to touch upon, even though it has a huge impact on them. So they said, why don't you all do something? Why don't you provide a platform where you bring all the other downstream countries together and make a common voice? So, likewise, with these issues, when he raised such, issues, I thought, like, why not we bring all those downstream countries together and have provide a common platform where they all can come together, and it will be more stronger to approach the Chinese government. So in Southeast Asian countries, even though they have like Mekong River Commission, but Chinese government, they are not part of this commission. They are just an observer country. And so Chinese government, what they do is there are like around 11 dams has been already built on this mainstream of the this Mekong River. And recently in 2019, there are one report which came up, and it clearly says that because of these dams, there are drought happening in the Southeast Asian countries. However, with the Chinese might, because of its economic power and influence in the region, the downstream countries, it's very difficult for them to approach Chinese government in these such issues. So if we can, provide a common platform or to all these downstream countries come together and they can make a common voice against the Chinese government, I'm sure there might be some way where we can negotiate with the Chinese government on all this exploitation of the water resources. So even though Chinese government, they pledge on these having carbon emission peak before 2030 and achieving net zero emission before 2060s. However, we demand that it shouldn't be met at the cost of the exploitation of the Tibetan resources. Thank you.
Do you want to add to that, or okay? Yeah, I think I just want to say that we had a discussion with Dechen yesterday, and we talked about the importance of reaching out to those nations, ASEAN nations, the SAARC countries, because those are the countries that are directly impacted by these policies and this situation that's going on. So I think a strategy for the Kashak and maybe for our Kalin here in the future would be to reach out to those countries, that are directly affected by these policies. So that's something to think about. Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I'm André Gattelin, French senator, and I am a member of the IPAC. This is not really a question, it's more a comments and a suggestion. Of course, all that has been said is true and really important, but we must also here denounce, I would say, the sham, the total deception that is the so-called Chinese policy in favor of struggling against climate change. It's a total narrative created by China, and when they joined in 2016 the Paris Agreement on the climate change, it was for them a way, a political way, to be more considerate inside the international community, and especially by the European countries. And they give fake information. They said that the United States produce 3 times more gas emission than China. It is not true. It's less than the double till the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. They do not say that last year the US emission was more than half less than the Chinese one. But this kind of rhetoric in favor of environment, in climate change, gets some incredible credibility among Western countries. And when our countries are today less naive in front of China on diplomacy, on military, on economy, we still consider them as fair partners for struggling the climate change and also be a very important part of the multilateralism. And I think I've discussed with French scientists or European scientists working on the Himalayan glaciers. They told me that the situation is awful, but they cannot really give the true figures because they couldn't get on and having the authorization to go to see the reality, to make measure in China. So we have to denounce that because it's a total fake. And another thing is that China invests a lot in green tech for some years. This year, an Italian report done by NGO is very interesting and show how they try to be the leaders and having all the Western country using their high-tech on environment. Okay, it could be nice, but it's a kind of dependency used by China. So we have to denounce this Chinese narrative on the struggle on China, on climate change, and the reality. We all know the soil pollution, with the air pollution, the deforestation, plus all what is done on the Tibetan Plateau is something very awful. But we must insist on the fact that we are naive when Western countries believe that China is really acting in favor of reducing the climate change. Thank you.
Do you want to address that, or should we go on to the next? Okay, yeah.
Dear Chairman, dear friends, Jānis Martins Skuja, Riga, Latvia. As I mentioned before, Tibet supporters for more than 100 years, but time looks younger. I am absolutely agree with idea, and we was the same idea, parallel with Honorable Sonam Frazi. Let's be honest, we don't need here to tell each other who is a China. We don't need to tell here each other who is Russia or others aggressors who right now lead or try to lead the world. And let's be honest, and maybe somebody wanna rise up who not agree with me. I call United Nation TDN, so that's mean United Nation to do nothing. And my question is somebody still believe in United Nations or not? Sorry, I'm not believe, because I see, and everybody see what's going on right now in Ukraine, and what United Nations to do for that. And we already know that President Zelensky told everything what he think about United Nations Security Council. So my question is, and same time what Honorable Sonam Frazi told, maybe there is time for another organization. And I don't want to say like only in regional platform for states or countries are around Tibet and China. But I talk about in Europe, in US, because there is members of different parliaments from all around the world. And we have some new initiatives in Europe, like 3C initiative. That's a political, economical, let's say, project. And this project, for me, is more hope than United Nations. So, and the same time, as I said, we need alternative, something to United Nations in our issues, and maybe parliamentarians who are coming here start think about this way. It's crazy idea. I'm not asked to organize new United Nations, but something crazy, and world belongs to crazy people. We need to do. The biggest problem, if yesterday we had refugees from Syria. Today we have refugees from Ukraine. Tomorrow, we, in Europe first of all, will have refugees from Tibet, from China, because of climate catastrophe coming. So, this is no question to somebody special, but let's think about it. Thank you.
Would you like to make a comment? No pressure, no pressure. You wanna? Okay, yeah.
在某个程度上面，我同意应该要挑战 UN 是不是处理 climate change 一个最好的政治平台。
To a certain degree, I also agree with you that we need to think twice about whether United Nations is the best international platform to address climate change.
但是我会把几个层面给分开看。在科学的部分，我确实认为 UN 下面的科学体系还是扮演了很重要的一个角色，把整体关于 climate change 的影响，其实做了很好的组织跟拼凑。
But we need to see this question from different angle. First, if we are talking about science, the science team under United Nations actually did a very good job, to come up with a very good report pointing out this problem.
但是在做一个全球性的契约上面 ，UN 确实在这个平台上面，也很多人其实有提出批评，就像西藏这么藏区西藏高原这么敏感的一个地区，可是他们的声音跟他们的议题却很难在这个 UNFCCC 的议程里面被清楚的呈现，这一直是被批评的很大的一个点。
But if you are talking about how to deal with this problem on a global level, talking about signing up the global contract, United Nations, there are a lot of criticism on United Nations that they could not reflect all the voices in every places, like the Tibet Plateau. What happened in Tibet cannot be reflected in UNFCCC. That's the best example.
所以我自己的看法比较是，在 UN 的系统外，是不是可以创造更多气候谈判多边或者是区域的平台，让这些可能在 UN 里面得不到好的支持的这些国家或者是族群社群，能够有一个新的机会，能够让大家看到。这些更敏感的地方，他们的需求跟他们的急迫性。
So, in my point of view, I think that outside the United Nations, maybe we could think about the possibility to create more international negotiations platform for more countries with more sensitive countries to these problems, and also like a regional platform to discuss these issues and making sure their voice being heard.
但是我不赞成一件事情，是因为挑战 UN 的正当性跟功能，就让各个国家的行动变得零散或各行其事，这是我不赞成，我不赞成这种做法，因为零散跟各行其事的行动没有办法真正解决气候问题。
But on challenging the authority of United Nations, I do not support that we should deal with this problem without a unified actions, because climate change, the issues of climate change does need a unified actions among different countries.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I also partly accept what you have said. And in 1995, there's a convention on water resource sharing by UN. However, the Chinese have voted against that convention. So therefore, China is not obliged or not, obliged under such convention, and they can independently do whatever they want with all those transboundary waters, rivers. So there are no accountable for what China is doing on those major international rivers, and even though there are some MOUs signed by the Chinese government, but there is no any water treaty signed between Chinese and the downstream countries. So the Chinese government have used those, water as a leverage to control the downstream countries. And in one incident, in 2017, during a Doklam crisis, a border crisis between China and India, and what happened is the Chinese government have stopped sharing hydrological data to India, because even though they have a MOU signed between these two countries, the Chinese government have they said that it is there are some kind of renovation going on in the hydrological station, so therefore they didn't share the hydrological data. However, they shared the same hydrological data to the Bangladesh's government, and this clearly shows that how the Chinese government can use this water as a political tools to control the other downstream countries. So in these terms, when we see through this terms, we can say that it is United Nations somewhat, not strong enough to bring Chinese government and make accountable of what is happening on those international rivers. Thank you.
Final question, Janet.
Thanks, Deshan. Janet Rice, Senator from Australia. I'm interested in that suppression of data by the Chinese with water, and how accurate was the analysis of the impacts of climate change on Tibet and the downstream countries and the issues of water in the latest IPCC report? And I think you mentioned, Deshan, in your talk that there's a need for more independent research to be happening to understand what's happening environmentally in Tibet. Do you think there's any prospects of that being permitted by China?
If you see in this IPCC report, most of the research done on the Tibetan Plateau is mainly done by the Chinese scientists. So we can, in this latest IPCC report, which was released in August 2019, I guess, so 2020, it is stated that most of the glaciers on the Himalayas and the Tibetan plateaus are receding at a very fast rate, and these have due to the climate change, there are erratic and huge spatial kind of climate change impact having on the Tibetan plateaus. And overall, what I want to talk about is the Tibetan plateau Tibetan plateau is warming twice as compared to what is happening on the other region, and it needs attention. So that's what the IPCC report, not only in this IPCC report, in the previous IPCC report, there are many issues has been discussed, written over the report, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So this will bring us to the end of our session here this morning. I want to thank our speakers, both of them, for their presentations and really unpacking and informing us why Tibet and Tibet's climate and environment matters. I just want to end here by adding to the discussion on why you should care about climate change in Tibet. I mean, many of you here today live thousands of miles away from Tibet, and what happens in Tibet may or may not be affecting your daily lives and activities. So why should you care about Tibet? Let me tell you why. Because Tibet is the roof of the world. Not the roof of India, it's not the roof of Nepal, it's not the roof of China. It is the roof of the world. And I think that's really important for us to understand what that means. And like any roof over our head, if the roof leaks, And if there's damage on that roof, it slowly but surely affects the whole house. And that's the reason why we are here today, and that's the reason why this discussion is so important. Scientific research has shown that what happens to the environment in Tibet not only affects Asia, Southeast Asia, but also Europe, North and South America, and the rest of the world. At the same time, I also believe that when we have this discussion on climate change in Tibet, we must talk about holding China accountable. The Chinese government, who is responsible for the destruction of Tibet's fragile environment, and we must clearly articulate that China's policy on climate and environment in Tibet is a violation of human rights. We must ensure that while we are having a discussion on climate and Tibet, we have to talk about the displacement of nomads. We have to talk about the mining. We have to talk about the damming, the diversion of rivers, and the dumping of nuclear waste in Tibet. Finally, we have to work together with our like-minded partners and countries, build coalitions, and come together to ensure that discussions and resolutions on climate at climate change conferences like the next conference of parties, COP28, next year in Dubai, includes Tibet, which is why your participation is very important. Thank you.